Isn't it crazy to see that Bitcoin is rallying in price over these past couple of months, absolutely skyrocketing and being up an insane amount, like over 80% for the year to date. And everybody was begging for a 10K Bitcoin, was saying that it's guaranteed that it's going down there. And typically, when everyone thinks something is when the exact opposite happens. The psychology behind Bitcoin and money in general is actually hilarious, where you can see this illustrates it perfectly with $30,000 when it first hit it, real happy. $30,000 when it was coming down to there, it's the worst price in the world, and $30,000 now is again a great thing. So the psychology of money behind there and how people envision this, just because Bitcoin fell down to like what 17 or $15,000. Now we're back up to $30,000, and now that feels great, right? It feels amazing to be there again. So, but it is during a time when there's banking crisis going on. The stock market's not really doing anything, and here we are with Bitcoin, the fastest horse in the race, which I don't think anyone should be surprised about. It shouldn't really catch you off guard that that's Bitcoin. But if we look at the price chart, we can see obviously year to date up 82%, which is insanely impressive. Compare that to the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 and things, and it's blowing those out of the water. It's actually crazy how much it's beating every other market right now. There's a lot of uncertainty around stocks and banks and what's going to happen and the Fed bailouts and things. So during a time like this, with even more recently, even the month is 46%, even with everything going on. Bitcoin's still moving up, which is kind of crazy. And an even crazier stat would be this right here. An all-time high of 53% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in 2+ years, despite the price falling as much as 74% from today's date in 2021, which is crazy to think about, right? That means people aren't buying Bitcoin for the money or to make money or as a short-term investment. Maybe they're buying it for 10+ years, which is probably the smartest thing to do. But it might show a shift here to people buying Bitcoin as a formal or a way of principle, out of principle, because it's a better form of money, because it's the best way to save your money. You can't save in dollars because the Fed's going to print more money and devalue your savings because they got to bail out some banks. But Bitcoin, you're not going to be devalued. So it makes more sense to save in Bitcoin and save for 10+ years than to save in dollars. And if we look at, other currencies, there's a ton of them, but basically any currency or any like not top currency like maybe the pound or the euro or the dollar, those they're not really doing good. You can see here back to all-time highs in Argentina. So 6.3 million Argentinian dollars, or whatever they're called, it's an all-time high in Bitcoin. Bitcoin's skyrocketing up because that currency is falling down. That currency is not performing well. It's inflating out of control. So you see what Bitcoin does. It absolutely skyrockets against this. We've seen this with an African country when they devalued everyone's savings by 50% overnight. Bitcoin skyrocketed. That's just what's going to happen. Bitcoin is going to move up when the currency is getting devalued, when it's becoming less valuable. It just makes sense, right? There's a limited amount of Bitcoin. If you devalue the currency, then Bitcoin is going to be worth more than what it was before because of you devaluing the currency. And we might just have one of the first pro-Bitcoin president with this right here. A presidential candidate, Robert Kennedy Jr., said the White House is colluding with the banksters to keep us all trapped in the bubble of profiteering and control, and said Bitcoin is an escape route, which obviously, I mean, if you're into Bitcoin, if you learn about it and you take the time to actually learn about it, it really is, right? Bitcoin is the escape route from the fiat printing disaster that's going on right now. And it's probably the best life raft out there. And to see a presidential candidate, somebody who might be president, who's pro Bitcoin, this early on, I thought at some point it was like a guarantee we would have a pro Bitcoin president. But to see it happening now seems like it's extremely early, and to see it, it's kind of crazy. And maybe one day we have a president who is pro Bitcoin, who pushes forward Bitcoin laws and maybe makes Bitcoin legal tender and does all these different things. Who knows? But I think that's inevitable, that at some point there will be a pro Bitcoin president. And we can look at his tweet exactly. This is him, obviously. He says the claim that Fed now is not the first step towards a CBDC would be more easily digestible were we not aware of the Biden administration's steady barrage of hostile broadsides against cryptocurrencies. Then between 2008 and 2022, the Fed partnered with a handful of big banks to print $10 trillion, 10 centuries of wealth in 15 years, a bonanza for the banksters. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin give the public an escape route from the splatter zone when this bubble inevitably bursts. So the White House is colluding with banksters to keep us all trapped in the bubble of profiteering and control. So a pretty big statement from a presidential candidate, somebody who might be running, and someone who you probably wouldn't imagine would be pro Bitcoin or would even really know a lot about it. But Fed now is literally CBDCs. They know that CBDC has a bad name, so they're smart enough not to name their currency or whatever they're going to try and do a CBDC because that has a negative connotation. They're not going to do that. So they rebranded it to what is Fed Now. And Fed Now is just a fancy way to get CBDCs into the system, to start that system, and to ultimately go down a pretty terrible path because I don't think anybody supports a CBDC, or nobody should, because the amount of control they would have over it is ridiculous. So, Fed Now, not a good thing. But it's been pretty eventful for the past couple weeks, couple months for Bitcoin, with banking problems, everything going on, everyone talking about the choke point operation, everything. And yet Bitcoin just doesn't seem to care. It's just been moving up in price. $30,000 is a huge thing for a lot of people looking at that saying, nobody would have expected Bitcoin to be at this price under these circumstances. Yet here we are. And we have a pro Bitcoin possible president or president candidate. So things are moving pretty quickly, right? A lot of support for Bitcoin and a lot of not support for CBDCs. And I think that's how it should be. I don't think that anyone should support a CBDC. It is absolutely going to be the worst thing in the world if you let that happen. And Bitcoin is the only alternative to that, right? It's the way to fight against that. And you can literally vote with your money to buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, and not be involved in this system. You can literally do that. But that's going to do it for this video. As always, don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in my next video.